we're going to talk about corrections. If we say sit, or give the command sit, the dog doesn't respond. The correction is going to be a light tug up on the leash, press the correction button one time. Okay? I am saying no, so I'm going to repeat that again, or I'm going to start over. If I say sit, dog doesn't respond. It's no, tug up, press the correction button one time. If I say down and the dog doesn't respond, I say no, I give a tug down on the leash, and I press the correction button one time. Okay, for heeling, heeling is a safety zone. Another reason why we make the video is to show you what that safety zone looks like. Your dog's head should be next to your left leg. So this is the safety zone. We're walking together. If at some point in time your dog starts to get too far ahead of you, your dog has left the safety zone. So I say no, I back up, tug on the leash, and I'm going to press the correction button repeatedly over and over again until the dog turns around and gets back into heel position. When they're in the heel position or they're back in the safety zone, I stop pressing the correction button. Okay? One additional note that can help you with heeling is your leash length is important, guys. Okay? Because your leash length is what's going to allow you to focus on where you're walking without having to stare at your dog while they're walking next to you. If your leash is too long and you're walking paying attention to where you're going, you're going to have no idea where your dog is. Your dog could be completely out of heel position. Or if your leash is too short, there's going to be constant tension. Constant tension in the leash makes it so the dog does not need to pay attention to you to know where you are. Most people that have an untrained dog walk their dog like this all the time. Okay? There's constant tension here. So what I recommend, have a loose, short leash. I like to make one big loop with the leash. I only want to feel the weight of the leash, no tension on it, so I can focus on where I'm going. Now, the leash is short enough right now, if my dog were to try to sniff the ground, I'm going to feel tension within 2 or 3 inches. If I'm paying attention to where I'm going and my dog starts to get out of position, even within 1 foot, I can feel it on my leash. And if that happens, I'm going to say no, back up, tug on the leash, press the correction button repeatedly until the dog turns around and gets back into heel position. A couple of things on heeling too, guys. Heeling is a very rewarding exercise for dogs. The reward in itself for following heel position is the walk gets to continue. Okay? If you ever see someone walking their dog and that picture looks like this, okay? Understand they are positively reinforcing the dog for pulling every step they walk forward. Okay? The only circumstances that I'm going to walk forward with a dog that's been trained is if that dog is in proper heel position. And they learn that in boot camp, 1 step at a time. If we take a step forward and they're too far ahead, we reset them. We start over again. 1 step, nope, too far ahead, reset. Then, at some point, the dog stays next to us. 2, 3, 4 steps begin. And the light bulb goes on, and the dog goes, oh, well, if I just stay right next to you, we get to go into new places and do new things. So now there's a benefit to the dog wanting to stay in that safety zone or wanting to stay in heel position. Okay? If you call me a week from now and say, Josiah, when I took my dog out for a walk, my dog was pulling me on leash, I'm going to say you made 6 feet worth of mistakes. Because when your dog took 1 foot too far ahead, you need to back up and immediately correct it. And leash length is your friend. So today when we're working with you, we will coach you on it. Go ahead. If this is your leash length, it's too long. Go ahead, shorten up your leash. Okay? Or if the trainer says, relax your arm a little bit, you might need to relax your arm because that tension isn't going to make your dog do any better. If anything, it's going to make it so your dog doesn't have to pay attention to you. Okay? Heeling means stay next to me. All right? So if you say heel and don't move, your dog's not going to move. If you say heel and you begin to walk, jog, or run, your dog is going to have to maintain pace next to you to stay in heel position. Come when called, very simple. If I say, Teddy, come, and Teddy's running in the opposite direction of me, Teddy is not coming when called. So I say no, and I begin correcting. Now I'm correcting over and over again by pressing the button repeatedly. The moment Teddy starts to run towards me, I stop pressing the button and I turn on my happy voice. Yay! puppy, right? And I do that, and guess what? The moment I turn on my happy voice and that dog's coming towards me, they increase their speed exponentially. They run even that much quicker. And guess what, guys? I'm all about setting dogs up for success. I know the quicker I get that dog to me, the less likely they are to either become distracted or change their mind. Now, if the dog's running to me and all of a sudden passes me and starts running in the wrong direction, no. Correction, correction, correction. I'm pressing the button until the moment they start running towards me. Here comes the happy voice. Yay! The dog needs to come to me. That's the first thing. When the dog gets to me, if they get into heel position, free, release and reward. If they get to me and stay right in front, I will guide them around to heel, just like you guys saw in the video. If you say come, dog doesn't respond, and let's say you begin to correct, but at some point in time, you stop correcting while your dog is running away from you, what's going to happen is your dog is going to think, if I run far enough away from you, this correction is going to go away. So it is super important, if you have to correct because your dog didn't immediately respond to come when called, you stay on the correction until they make the right choice, which is to come to you. Place command is go to your bed, lay down, and stay there. When you say place, dog needs to go out of the bed and lay down. If they get off of the place bed, the moment the paw comes off of the bed, we say no, and we begin correcting. Okay? When the paws are back on the bed and they lay down, that's when we stop correcting. For jumping, there's a couple of ways to address this. The first is, let's say you're holding the remote. Someone comes in your yard or comes into your house, and from across the room or across the yard, your dog tries to jump. You say no and you correct. Okay? When the paws are firm on the floor, we stop correcting. The other scenario, though, is let's say you come through the door and there your dog is and you don't have the remote. Okay? And this is sometimes where a dog will test, especially right when they come home, and they may try to jump. So this is where you can do a paw grab. So I come in the door, dog's excited to see me, and tries to jump. I'm not going to push the dog down. I'm going to let the dog go ahead, come on up into this jumping position, and I grab the paws. Okay? And I'm going to hold the paws long enough. They're going to get bored, tired. They're going to get uncomfortable in this position. And I know that because they're going to start to pull and tug and twist and try to get their paws away from me. And I'm going to hold them unbearably long enough that I know when I let go, they're happy to have their freedom and they're happy to have their paws back down on the floor. Okay? We do this in boot camp, week 1. Dogs are out running around play groups, and we take turns doing it. We go out, yay, puppies, right? And they come running up to us, and it's week 1, so they'll try to jump. We grab the paws. And when we grab them, at first the dog is like, hey, this is kind of cool. I like being up here, right? Well, we're ignoring the dog. We're not talking to them. We're not petting them. And then they start to get bored and tired, and they don't like being there. And now they're like, okay, I want to go play with the other dogs. I don't want to be here anymore. And they realize they're stuck. And this is what makes it so the dog doesn't want to put their paws up. So then a week later, now that we've had these learning experiences, we go out and do the same thing. Yay, puppies, right? And they come running up to us, and we'll even, hey, you want to jump? And that dog is looking at me like, there is no way in hell I'm jumping on this guy, okay? And this, when the dog doesn't jump, is when I'm going to reward them. Here comes the positive reinforcement. Good boy, good girl. And now we're getting somewhere because the dog is realizing if I come running up to this person and I don't jump on them, they're going to interact with me. They're going to pet me, okay? So that's the balance. If you do a paw grab, it's important you do it long enough that the dog doesn't like it. Because if you do a paw grab and let go and it becomes a game, it's counterproductive to the dog not jumping moving forward. For drop it, very simple. The dog has something in its mouth. You say drop it. If the dog doesn't drop the item, we say no. We press the correction button repeatedly until the dog drops the item. So returning home, you guys are going to enter what I call the testing phase. Okay? The dog's going to be testing the home environment. The dog is going to be testing you guys, and dogs are very good at finding out where their boundaries are. And I'm not talking about just boundaries in the yard. I'm talking about boundaries in terms of how they respond to your commands. And what you can do to help create a clear and concise picture for them is first and foremost always be in control. And you can do that by confining your dog to a crate when they're going to be unsupervised. Okay? And by confining them into the crate, what's going to happen is there's going to be no forms of mischief and no forms of behaviors that are going to happen without your supervision. Okay? And before they come out of the crate, this is when we're going to put on the electronic collar. That way, as they come out of the crate, whether it's come when called, waiting at a doorway, going outside, whatever it is, we have the ability to follow through and reinforce the commands. For the first week back home, I suggest having your dog wear a 6-foot lightweight leash. Okay, and that's because we will be using this to help them get back to a safety zone if or when they decide to leave the safety zone. For example, place command. Okay, or if we say downstay, if they leave the spot, it's a lot easier to get a hold of the leash to help bring them back to where the correction is going to stop. Because then when they leave the spot, we're going to correct until they get back there. Okay, so after the first week, once they know where their place bed is or the safety zones are established, you won't need this anymore, but for the first week, I recommend having a 6-foot lightweight leash on them. Going back to the graduation video, when you watch the very first segment of the dogs getting ready to go out for play groups, they were all laying down in their crates, okay? That's a formality that they've learned in boot camp. You have to lay down in your crate and show impulse control before you get to come out for play groups. Laying down in the crate is a formality that makes it a lot easier to put on the electronic collar. Today, when we go through handler training and we go through the hands-on portion, you're going to have your dog go into a crate, lay down, you're going to take off the collar, close the crate door, have your dog lay down, reopen the crate door, put the collar on, and release them out. Okay, and we're going to walk you through that so that going home you understand this formality. Now, if when you go to open up the crate door, they get out of the down position and try to push through the crate, you use the door as a shield to block them so that they don't have success pushing through that doorway. So when we give a command, one of two things can happen. All right, and we're going to use down in this example. So we're going to automatically assume we have their eye contact, right? Dog's looking at us, we tell them down. And when we say down, first thing that can happen, they go into the down position. And we hope that happens every time. Okay? And when they're in the down position, if we want them to stay, we would tell them stay. Otherwise, to release them, that's the positive marker. So ding, you just got it right. And free, you're now free to get out of down position. And then comes the positive reinforcement. Okay? Today, the positive reinforcement is going to be petting and praise. But it can be things like taking them for a walk, treats, toys, their food, a bone, a chew item, interactive play. It's whatever we have access to at the point that we've released our dog from position. The other thing that can happen when we tell them down is they don't respond. Okay? And if they don't respond, we're going to give the negative marker, no, that's the, you just got it wrong. And here comes the negative consequence. So the negative consequence for not downing, if you remember, is a tug down on the leash, we press the correction button one time. If they still haven't responded, we will give additional corrections as needed. However, when they do get into position, we're still going to release them and we're still going to reward them. Okay? So even though there was a correction to follow through with it, we still release them and we still reward them. Going home, if you give your dog a command and your dog does not respond, if you do nothing, your commands immediately will become optional. Okay? This is the testing behavior. This is establishing the boundaries. This is entirely out of our control. If you give a command and the dog doesn't respond and you say, well, whatever, doesn't matter, right then and there, you've established to your dog that that command is optional. Okay? We never want any of our clients to be over here on this side of the flow chart, but it's up to you guys. Okay? And when you've invested in your dog's training and education, I'm assuming none of you want to be over here, and all of you want to be over here with me. Okay? One additional note on the positive reinforcement. The positive reinforcement comes out after the fact. Okay? It's a reward. It's afterward. That's very different from bribery. So I've had people ask me, do you use treats in your training? Well, yeah, of course. Do you use food? Of course we do. But there's a difference, because if I give my dog a command like down and my dog lays down, and I say free, and then I walk across the room and take out a treat and give it to him as a complete surprise, that's a very different picture from me doing this. Hey, Teddy, what's your favorite kind of treats? Down. Okay? Now the dog knows what the reward is, and now the dog is weighing out the competing motivators to see if they want to respond to it or not. Two totally different pictures. The rewards always come out afterward. So, if the correction isn't working, let's say you give a correction, dog's not responding. First things first is we need to make sure that we don't have an equipment failure. Okay? What I mean by that, Number one, is the collar turned on and functioning? Okay, I can easily look at it and say, yep, my display's lit up blue, right? Secondly, I have a test button. All right, when I press the test button, it's going to make the collar vibrate. The number one mistake that most people make going home is they do not tighten up the collar enough. So Teddy right now has on his electronic collar, but it's obvious it's loose, right? So if Teddy was out running around or in movement, those contact points are not going to be making constant contact. So if I give a correction, doesn't matter what the correction level is, it's not actually going to accomplish what we need it to, which is giving the correction. So collars that we supply or are going home here have a bungee. So we pull up on the two knots, separate them. I take my two fingers, put them in between the contact points in the skin, I can feel constant tension there. Okay? So if I've given a correction, my dog's not responding, right away I should check to make sure that it's actually snug enough to be making constant contact. So if we've ruled out that the equipment is not the problem, we can also look at the environment and say, what's going on here? Is this a normal situation for my dog? In your house or in your yard, that's where the normal correction level may apply. So if your dog's normal correction level is 20, okay, and I'm just grabbing a random number, 20 out of 100. Well, in your home, 20 in normal circumstances might be the proper level of correction. But let's say you take your dog out to Lake Harriet for a walk. And if you've been to Lake Harriet before, you know there's tons of people and dogs everywhere, okay? So we get there and we start the walk, we back up and correct because Teddy got too far ahead. Right away, Teddy's too far ahead again. 20 is not going to be enough, okay? So if I've given 3 corrections and Teddy's not responding, 3 black corrections, I'm going to give a red correction, okay? And the red button is programmed to a higher level, okay? And that number is indicated on your statistics sheet, okay? So you may need to increase the level of correction to take control of the situation. And if there's a lot of excitement, that's where you may need to increase the level of control until your dog responds. Keep in mind, the electronic collar goes up to 100. So if your normal correction level was 30, 40, 50, 90, you can go up to 100. The other thing that can really help you guys process through any sort of testing behavior is repeating the scenario until your dog gets it right. Okay, so let's say somebody's at the front door. Ding dong. What's the command we want to use for someone being at the front door? Place, correct. I heard some correct answers out there. Place command. So we say place, our dog lays down on the place bed, and we go to answer the front door. And as we go to answer the front door, the dog gets excited because of their previous life back home. They jump off the place bed. Well, I say no, negative marker, wrong response, and I begin correcting. Okay? So I correct, get the dog back on the place bed, and then when I go to answer the door, it's a friend or a family member. It's somebody who I know. This is where I'm going to repeat the scenario. I'm going to say, you know what, would you please go back outside? Don't do this on a really cold day. That's not nice, right? But they go back outside and I say, ring the doorbell a bunch of times, come in, act very excited. So they do. And let's say it takes 5 times of repeating the scenario of the person ringing the doorbell and coming through the front door for the dog to hold place command. 2 things take place there. Number 1, we've counter-conditioned them to the environmental stimulus. That's the scientific way of saying we've gotten them bored with the distraction, okay? So it took 5 times for that to happen. And then the second thing is your rapport building. You've now demonstrated to your dog, we're not going to move on to the next thing until you get this thing right. And that's a very important learning exercise for them. Okay, so repeating the scenario, if you can, until your dog gets it right is a very effective way of processing through the testing phase. As we're talking about use of correction to reinforce a dog not responding, there's a couple of things that are important to understand. The first, a correction must never create injury. Okay? Secondly, when we're talking about using the obedience commands, if they don't respond, we're going to give that negative marker before we give the correction. Okay? Have you guys ever heard someone say, you can't correct a dog after the fact? Yeah, I have. And here's the thing, because dogs live in the moment, right? So let's say my dog engages in an unwanted behavior in the house, and my remote is across the room. Well, when the dog is engaging in the behavior over here, and I observe it, it's going to take me a moment to come walk across the room and get my remote, right? And by then, the behavior could have ended. So now when I correct the dog doesn't know why was I being corrected, okay? This is where the negative marker no becomes very helpful. Because although we don't have the remote on us, it's across the room, and we see the behavior, I can immediately mark it. I say no. Walk across the room, take the remote, apply the correction. The dog associates the correction with the negative marker, which was right when the behavior took place. Within reason, guys. We can't do this a half an hour later. We can't say no and then later on in the day go get the remote. That's not the way this works, okay? And the rule of thumb that I'd give you is really within about 30 seconds. The less time, the better, but that's the rule of thumb that I would use. And then a correction is non-emotional, okay? This is hard for humans, but when we give a correction, we're not going to be raising our voice, we're not going to get angry, and we're not going to hold a grudge for the remainder of the day. Once we've given the correction, we have to just let it go because that's how dogs think and how they operate. And then the correction needs to be intolerable. Okay? The correction goes away when either the dog responds to the command or disengages from the unwanted behavior. And I like to use the honey badger in this example because the honey badger is a very tenacious, intelligent creature. And if you're not familiar with one, if you go to YouTube and search honey badger does not care, you're going to see a video of the honey badger being a very tenacious creature. So the honey badger goes and starts eating the beehive, and it's getting stung by thousands or hundreds of bees, right? Doesn't care, continues to eat the honey. Goes after a cobra, okay? Cobra bites the honey badger. Honey badger goes into a coma for about an hour, wakes up, goes and eats the cobra anyway, okay? Now the reason I'm explaining this to you is because there's going to come a point in time where you see an ounce of honey badger in your dog, okay? You go to give a correction, and you can see the dog felt the correction, but the dog is like, not today, doesn't matter, I'm going after this thing. Well, we have to stay on the correction until the dog disengages from the behavior or responds to it. And that's what I mean by the correction has to be intolerable, because that's the point where the dog gives up. And then barking or whining is not going to make the correction go away. All right? So here's what happens when you give your dog a correction. It's going to startle them. Your dog doesn't see it coming. Your dog doesn't hear it coming. It's going to startle them. And that's the point. So if you guys were up here watching a scary movie right now, and I came up behind you, and all of a sudden I went, boo, right? Now, you might go, bah, and you jump out of your chair. Now, I didn't hurt you, but I definitely startled you because you were engaged mentally in something else that was going on up here. And it might even be something very exciting or scary. Well, that happens to dogs too. Dogs are very much in the moment, excited and driven by something, and the correction catches them off guard, and they will vocalize, ah, right? And I've seen the owner do this. Ooh, I'm not going to press that button again, right? And the dog goes, aha, if I make this noise, you won't correct me anymore, okay? The other thing that can happen too is sometimes dogs will put up a protest, okay? We go to correct, they can feel the correction, but they're frustrated because they want to go after something else that doesn't coincide with whatever command we've given. And so sometimes that vocalizing also can come from the dog protesting whatever the command is or wanting to stay with the behavior. But the barking or whining is not going to make the correction go away. The command or expectation of the behavior needs to be consistent across the board. So if you have a household where there's more than one person, everybody has to subscribe to the same belief pattern, and everybody has to be on the same page in terms of what is allowable and what is not. Dogs don't do well with the word sometimes. Dogs don't do well with gray areas. And a couple of examples that I would give you could be being allowed on the couch. Okay? It's all or nothing, guys. Jumping on people. That's another one. I've seen it where one person in the household goes, I love it when the dog jumps on me and gives me a hug. Okay? And then everybody else in the household goes, I thought this dog just went to boot camp. Why is it trying to jump on people, right? Well, somebody in the household is allowing that behavior. So it's not fair for the dog to sometimes be corrected for doing something and then other times be rewarded for it. So we have to be on the same page. This is a funny topic because as I'm going through it, sometimes I see people looking at each other and elbowing and going like, see that? You heard him, right? And then the dog must not be able to avoid or escape the correction. So if you open up the crate and go free and let the dog out, and then later on go, oh yeah, that's right, I need to put the collar on, The dog's already loose. You call the dog and the dog doesn't come to you. You have no ability to follow through with that command. So for that reason, like we mentioned earlier, the collar goes on before they're allowed out of the crate. And then there's multiple vehicles of correction. So we live in a very politically correct society, right? And in this society, we hear things like you should never tell your dog no. Okay? Ooh, electronic collar. No, that's very bad, right? Well, here's the thing, guys. Dogs don't operate the way we as humans do. So when I talked earlier about if I played a commercial for you, you might learn from it. Your dog won't. Your dog learns from actions and reactions in their world, real things that happen. Okay, so, and if you watch dogs go out for play groups and run around and interact with each other, even within their own pack, when one dog is going to correct another dog, it is not a conversation. Okay? The one dog doesn't go, "Now listen, Bubba, I don't like it when you do that, and if you do it again, I'm going to bite you." No. Bubba has a point where Bubba goes, "Nope," boom, and there's a bite. Okay? And there might be contusions. It is a very scary, strong, visceral response that comes from one dog to the next. And guess what? That one correction might make it so that other dog never again re-engages in that behavior. Well, the reason I'm explaining this to you is because there may come a point in time where you need to physically correct your dog. Okay? Your dog goes to put its teeth on your arm. That's an inappropriate behavior. There needs to be a correction. It might be a bonk on the nose. It might be a pinch on the ear. It might be some form of discomfort for the dog to go, "Whoa, I don't want to do that anymore." Okay? Because again, we can't have a conversation with the dog. We can't go, "Now listen, the reason you're in boot camp is because your owners don't like it when you do this and this and this, so you better promise not." No, that's not the way it works. Okay? And that physical correction sometimes has to be immediate right when the behavior takes place. Okay? The only time we're going to give a correction is if we can actually see through the behavior and end on a positive note. We're not going to give corrections unless we can actually work through whatever the behavior was. But then regardless, once we see through the behavior and we get where we want to be, there is going to be positive reinforcement for it. If you've had to give a correction, it's important that you understand a couple of things. Number one, what was the end result? Did you actually see through the behavior? Okay, if not, it's meaningless. And then wherever you leave off is indicator of what's going to happen the next time you're in that same situation. One of the examples I'll give you is, let's say you like to take your dog for a walk in your neighborhood. And as you're getting closer to your home, your dog knows, "Hey, I know where we're going. I'm going to show the way." And the dog starts to get a foot too far ahead. And you continue walking 2 feet, 3 feet. Now all of a sudden the dog's pulling you the last little stretch home. Well, guess what? The next time you go out for a walk and you say heel, you're going to pick up right where you left off. Your dog's going to be at the end of the leash pulling you. Okay, so in that situation, 1 foot too far ahead, we're going to back up, reset, and sometimes I'm going to take that last stretch of home 3 or 4 times before we get home to make sure that the dog is not anticipating that. But the point of this is wherever you leave off in that situation is right where you're going to pick up the next time you're in that same situation.